Thank you so much for meeting with me today, Mr. Newth. And I had a few questions to ask you. What made you get into the field of museums and curation?
Sure, yeah, no, thank you for inviting me to speak with you. Like many people maybe my age who are in the field, honestly, it was Indiana Jones and all the excitement of being a young person interested in the adventure and this really quest for understanding the past. It was something that I've always have enjoyed, and really from the artifact point of view, not there's so many points of view and interest in history that one could take, and I really like the idea that things existed and survived from hundreds and thousands of years ago, and really got me to then start to enjoy museums and going to museums and seeing things like say that were somebody else handled from so long ago. So then when I went to the University of Michigan for my undergrad, I had to make a decision. I at that time I actually was pretty strong in sciences. I for some reason they just were easier for me to understand than say humanities and English and grammar. But I decided to pursue medieval studies and classical archaeology because of this passion, and also because it was challenging, this idea of asking questions and then having to research, and that was something I it pushed me to really go deeper into the objects and find my way to eventually grad school and then into museums. I like other people who have archaeology degrees, was I going to work in a museum or was I going to be a practicing archaeologist? And I took internships at the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology when I was at Michigan, and eventually the Cloisters and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And I felt comfortable in museums, and I liked being surrounded by visitors and others who work in museums and the objects, and to the point where I really my passion has become is really allowing other people to see the art and maybe hopefully have the same kind of excitement and energy that I did when I was first going to museums.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think Indiana Jones has inspired a lot of people too.
Yeah.
So, what is your work with the Princeton Art Museum involve, or generally like your work in museums in general?
Yeah, so I'll say the short of it. When I started, I went into at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I was hired as a research assistant in the European art department, and particularly to help focus on the medieval art, but the European decorative arts and sculptures. And it was a great opportunity because at the time they were building a brand new wing, and it required us to actually evacuate part of the building so that it could be demoed for the new building to be built. And that evacuation gave me the opportunity to one, work in a museum environment among a team and really, understand people's roles and responsibilities to accomplish common goals. But two, it allowed me to handle, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, every single object in the European decorative arts collection. And as somebody just out of grad school, I mean that's one of the best ways to learn is to actually be with the object. And so from there, I really then started to focus more on the exhibition project management, which has then led to museum management. And at Princeton, my role is I'm responsible to all the curators, the registrars, the conservators, the exhibition planning. So really the people who are focused on the physical objects and how we display them and how we share them with other museums and research them. And right now, as you may be aware, we're also building a brand new museum. And the museum building we had was great and served the public in many ways for a long time, but it really was out of date for amenities as well as meeting preservation standards that we want to meet. So we have a wonderful opportunity working with Sir David Adjaye and his architectural team to build a new building, and that really interested me be a part of another building project, and again, hopefully create experiences for people that I had. So we're focused on that, and my role is to really help keep that on schedule and keep us all focused on what the priorities are at any given time. And all looks good to open in October 2024.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about the preserving of culture and like the artifact there, and that's something that I'd really like to focus on. So, like as that is part of your job, what would you say that art conservation and just like as you were talking about the moving artifacts, that's obviously a big part of it as well. How, like what does that involve and how is it done? Like how do you manage to preserve all that in a museum?
Yeah, so I think there's two answers, and one is creating climates that are safe for objects. So many museums, if they can, they try to maintain a stable temperature and a stable relative humidity mark, and slight variations because nothing is able to be perfect all the time. And so creating an environment that is good for an object to just sit in, right? Because museums typically are not places where people can come and handle the objects. They're just sitting there, and so with the Greek material in particular, how do we make sure that the ceramics, which is a fairly durable material, and stone. I mean, this is, I think, in large part why much of ancient Greece and ancient Rome and material does still survive, because it's durable material. How do we make sure that that continues? And it's a combination of casework often, creating safe displays. And what I mean by that is, people naturally do want to touch, and more museums are accepting that people learn with fewer barriers, meaning sometimes piece of glass in front of an object is a barrier for people for a variety of reasons. So how can we display art without those barriers? And that means also then how do we make sure, again, people aren't going to go touch? So we have those conversations often. We do have staff who are trained in conserving and preservation, and that's a fascinating field, and one that a lot of people enjoy, because again, it's really intimate connection with objects. And unfortunately, often their work is to repair things, but more and more it's also to help us understand objects. And the better we can understand objects from a materials point of view, the better we can preserve them and create environments for their safe display.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, though, about preservation really is making people aware of objects. And museums have to decide what they're going to put in labels or in various didactics, and sometimes the opportunity is to talk about the actual materials and make people again aware of what it is made of, not just why it was made or who made it or what it was for, but how it was made. And that's connects with some people as, oh, I shouldn't touch that because it's whatever fragile material. So it's educating people, but in a way that's hopefully engaging, right? Not just security and stand back. We're taking a philosophy of we don't want people to touch things, and as we build a new building, and so every conversation we have about preservation or gallery display is that mentality of we don't want people to touch, which helps us, I think, not come up with, again, such imposing, rigid, a guard or an officer is going to stand there and just stop people, right? Like, we don't want that experience for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. And I understand that you haven't worked much outside of the museum, right? So, but if you can speak on this, do you think that there is any difference with actual fieldwork archaeology and the museum when it comes to preserving the artifacts and the culture?
I don't. The archaeologists that I do know, they take the same approach. I mean,
Yeah.
they're starting from a different point, right? They're at the origin. Well, the fine spot of an object, and often that is the origin, and they're very much trying to preserve that spot, right? I mean, yes, an object may be removed, but they're documenting heavily how it was found, what the ground looked like, and certainly with technology nowadays, the imagery and the various ways of capturing what a space looked like helps. And again, that informs future preservation. If we know the objects, where it was found, and the material that was around it, like that helps actually inform what we know about an object. And so archaeologists and museums very much partner in going back to Indiana Jones, right? His best friend was the museum director. So I think it is very much a shared vision and approach. They often also have at the sites. I mean, museum workers may go to certain sites and be part of the team for a few weeks, and they do have. I know several conservators I know go to sites for a couple weeks each year and provide that expertise on the sites.
Mhm. And just in general, cultural preservation, especially with Greek artifacts, isn't something that, at least here in Greece, is focused on much. How important would you say that cultural preservation is to you, but also to other museums in general, just to the museum world in general?
It's very important. In I see museums as serving as a community center in many ways, and certainly our populations are so diverse and grown so much that some museum might connect with various communities more than others, just because maybe that community is larger, or the collection in that area is larger, or whatever reasons. But I think cultural preservation is super important in that people are using art or artifacts in more ways now. I mean, we see them, creative jobs. I mean, people are using them as inspiration for their work. I worked with a group in Boston, and they would bring in the medical students and use art and teach them how it can help them, through tough experiences. They can find hopefully some sort of meditation or solace, with using spaces like museums and using the art. So art and artifacts are available to so many people in different ways. And then there's, of course, hopefully, many communities, the pride in seeing their cultural history, right?
Mhm.
And I can't speak for anybody other than myself, but going to a place and being like, wow, like, what if my ancestor saw
Hmm.
that, right? I mean, that there's that group too. And so museums, I think, much more than when I started 20 years ago, are also trying to really connect with their communities and help themselves, meaning help the museum, um, be a place for those regional audiences as much as anything. We ourselves are involving local representatives to help us even with our interpretation planning of our new building. We realize, yes, curators and interpreters can provide a knowledge that perhaps others don't have, but that shouldn't be the only voice in a museum, right?
Mhm.
People should see their own voice in a museum, and how does that manifest? And that's an active conversation, at least in certainly North American museums.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for answering these questions. You've been very
Yeah.
helpful. And